Hey guys, Fergal from Poker VIP here. We are back for a two-part series. We are going to be reviewing a player's play. They are quite new to the game, so we're going to be going through it with that in mind. We are going to be taking a fairly beginner's approach to it, looking for the common leaks that you might see with a new player to the game and seeing what we can pick up with, and then just looking to maybe kind of summarize that at the end in terms of some kind of key takeaway points home. So just going to be playing the one table. We're going to be going through for around about an hour in total play. We might fast forward certain bits depending on the speed of the action. We might pause it at certain bits as we're going through. We'll see how we get on there. So first thing to note, player has bought in for €25 in a 25 cent 50 cent game. I always recommend buying in for the max amount, so taking down into 100 BB stack. Whether that means you want to drop down to 25 NL, that's a reasonable approach, or buy in for the full 50. That'd be the first takeaway point home. I think it's always best to get a player comfortable playing 100 big blind games. The deeper the stacks, typically speaking, the bigger your win rate can be. And getting familiar with the deeper stack play is always a positive move in my book. My money wants to come home. Nice, nice. Setting the tone straight away. Okay, and we've dealt our first hand, and we have Ace King. Nice. Okay, so the player has pre-selected the raise button. So this is obviously a no limit table. The pre-selective action is just going to go for a min raise here. So would steer clear of using this. I'd steer clear of using the auto actions completely. Except for maybe the auto fold. So, okay, so small blind has raised it up, so we have a pretty easy 3-bet here on our hands. And okay, so again, so we click back here to just at the €2, so we go for the min raise of an additional 75 cent on top. So again, yeah, so I wouldn't be min raising here. I would definitely be looking to bump this up a bit bigger. I'd be going to kind of 3x's opening raise, so somewhere around the 375 mark. And obviously a pretty favorable board for us. And we just go for pot. I'd probably go for a smaller size here, but this seems pretty reasonable. Sorry, just getting a bit comfy here. I mean, yeah, we definitely have a bet on our hands. I would probably go smaller, but this is fine. I wouldn't be nitpicking here. Pre-flop though, I think your raise size definitely needs to be adjusted. So we don't want to. We very rarely want to just be min raising, especially clicking back like that. Villain just folds. That's fine. We have the option to show winning cards, and we have the option to not. I would always recommend not. So. Okay, so we should be able to set it up so that we auto post the blinds, so that we don't have to do it every single time as well. And again, we're using the auto populate actions. I would steer clear completely of these if possible. And blind versus blind, I don't mind limping. I would be bringing this in for a raise, but it seems pretty okay. And on ace 3, after we do go for the limp call, I would be inclined to check here, which is what we do. Nice. With the gut shot and ace high, we have a couple of options. So I think folding is probably a bit weak, purely because we're gonna have the best hand here sometimes. We have a gut shot to the absolute nuts. Obviously not with the 10 of clubs, because that would put a possible straight of possible flush on board. But in general, we've got a gut shot to a very strong hand. Ace high still ranks to be good sometimes. And we can improve via the ace as well. Okay, I'm going to pause the video here. So the check call on the flop seems perfectly reasonable. We could go for a check raise as a bluff with outs. That would also be fine. The check call seems perfectly adequate though. Pre-flop though, I think you should be bringing that in for a raise over the limp call. But again, that's a pretty minor point. This bet here doesn't make any sense to me really though, because if we think about this logically, so we're betting pot, so we're showing a decent whack of strength here. There's 4 to a straight on the board, so we have the ace, king, queen, jack. Any 10 makes a straight, and there is also a possible flush out there as well. It's incredibly difficult for villain to call us with the worst hand here when we take this sizing especially. And our hand is essentially it's going to be a bluff catcher in this instance, where if we check and villain bets, we only have one pair on a very, very scary board. And betting here, we're basically turning this hand, like a hand with reasonable showdown, into a bluff. Which there are times when you want to do that. I don't think this is one of them though. I think this is just going to get called by worse and very. I mean, occasionally we do fold out better hands. We can potentially fold out some two pairs and stuff like that. But if we are going to bluff that, I think we can get away with a smaller sizing. But I think taking our showdown with a decent one pair hand is probably going to be better than betting there. So I'm just going to speed up the action a little bit. So as I said, I think we're going to stop and we're going to pause and discuss spots, and I'm going to kind of just speed through where we don't have action. This is something that we want to avoid doing completely. Limping into the pot is almost never going to be what you want to be doing. If you're the first person in, a very easy mantra to go by is, if the hand is good enough to limp in, you should be bringing it in for a raise. There are times where you might not want to do that, but it's you know, they're going to be rarer than where if you want to be playing it, just bring it in for a raise. And 9 10 offsuit is definitely going to be good enough to open the button with. When used to be cool here goes for the large raise, and well, this we should be folding to this raise anyway. When this guy brings it in for the 3-bet, we've got a very easy fold, which is what we do. Nice. And we don't really care too much about how the rest of the hand progresses. Interesting to note that he chooses this large sizing and then he folds for a pretty small amount. Okay, King Jack, definitely a very playable hand. Looks like we're leaning towards the raise. Again, we should be sizing up here. So min raising is rarely going to be what we want to do. There's an argument for min raising from the button, but if you want to be going kind of 2.5x to 3x would be a better sort of standard 3x is very reasonable from all positions. 2.5x to 75 or to 125 cents, should I say, also makes a lot of sense. The min raise doesn't really accomplish all that much. And here we are getting a pretty reasonable price with a pretty reasonable hand. I'd be electing to call here. Used to be cool has taken this sizing and has gone for the fold before. There's some merit to potentially turning this into a 4-bet bluff, but I think just calling is going to be absolutely fine with the hand that flops a lot of two pairs, or a lot of top pairs rather. And here we are just going to check fold, I would assume. Unlikely the king high is ahead at the current moment in time. And there, I mean, we have some backdoor potential with the queen. We've got 3 to a straight in there, but I think just check folding and keeping it nice and simple to start out with while you're learning the game is going to be the way that you want to go. And yeah, we want to post the big blind. So I'm not sure how you can definitely set this up so that it just auto posts your blind so that you don't have to keep doing that every time. I would highly recommend getting that done as well. So I'm just going to be taking some notes here as we're going through, because we're gonna kind of do a bit of a summary towards the end. So here, this guy's gone a little bit over the min raise, gone to 1.14. I would be, this isn't me taking this, it's the guy who recorded this video is just taking a screenshot here or something. With 9-7 offsuit, this is a pretty playable hand with a very reasonable price on the pot. So we only had to call, I think it was 64 cent in there to win 269. So we're getting a pretty good price with a hand that's semi-connected. It's obviously not a powerhouse or anything close to it, but it's going to be worth seeing a flop there, getting the pot odds that we're getting there on your call. So I would have elected to call there, especially because we're closing the action and nobody else is able to re-raise you out of your pot or out of the pot or anything like that. You've just got a very easy call and see a flop. Ace-8, we are raising. Again, we need to get out of this min-raising habit. Especially blind versus blind, because if we look there, villain only has to call 50 cent, and we're going for the click back re-raise with the ace-8. I actually kind of like this versus this aggressive guy. I'd be I'm just gonna pause it here for a second. I'd be going bigger again. Like as I said, it's almost never that we want to just be clicking that raise button. We want to be adjusting our bet size before we allow it, and almost always we want to be sizing it up from the minimum amount that we're able to do. This is a board where I would definitely be continuing after we put in the little click back 4-bet. We're going to have all aces, all kings potentially with this way. We can have ace king. Villain is going to struggle to have like the kind of ace king type hands and stuff like that. So this is a board I will absolutely be looking to continuation bet. and just looking to get villain to fold. We opt for the check. We've put ourselves in a bit of an awkward spot now because I think with the bet on the flop there, we're going to win at a pretty reasonable percentage of the time. When we do check and we give initiative to the villain, like check calling isn't an option. So if we wanted to win this pot, the only real option is to go for the check raise, which I'm not a huge fan of doing because we're risking a lot more in terms of our euros to win a lower amount in relation to how much we're wagering compared to just a small c bet on the flop. So if we bet, like, you know, let me just rewind that there, see how much the pot was. So it was 8.69. If we bet like somewhere between 3 and 4 euro there, villain's gonna have to fold a pretty decent amount of the time, and we can just pick that up after we've shown so much strength pre-flop. But pre-flop, I think your initial raise size should be bigger. When villain does 3-bet, if we are going to go for the 4-bet, we need to be 4-betting bigger as well, moving away from the min raising stuff. But we should, in theory, probably just be folding when we are out of position like that as well. So ace 8-3 there, obviously a very, very straightforward fold. We're just going to fast forward through this video now, or fast forward through the action here. And okay, I kind of want to see just how that hand came to be exactly, because this is going to be useful to note. So this guy just rips it in for the 12.35 with the middle pair. Okay, so Wit is going to be a player that we want to get involved with for sure. So as I said, in general, we're going to be kind of skipping past. So we're delighted to see this guy rebuy. We're not going to be focusing too much. Jack Deuce, just fold. This is never going to be a call. It's a completely trash hand, and it is not something that we want to be playing ever, really, when we have the option to fold it. So adjust what kind of hands that you are playing pre. Like when we do limp, like we kind of have to call here now. It's a really like, this is the sort of spot, like, so we've put in 50 cent already. We only have to put in another 60, and there's a lot more money in the pot after that guy has raised it up, and we're heads up getting position. So when we do limp there, we've put ourselves in a really annoying spot, where pot odds kind of dictate that we sort of have to call there, because again, in that instance, we're closing the action and we're getting a very good price, going back to the same kind of spot that I was talking about earlier on. Again, 8-9 here would be very acceptable to call in this instance. Nice. So we flop middle pair. Far from a powerhouse, but it is a reasonable holding. The pot sizing here, again, so okay, so we seem to be pre-flop, we're only ever min raising, and post-flop we only ever seem to be really potting. So we need to be adjusting those sizes drastically. So this lead out here, we will get a decent number of folds with it, so that's fine. We protect our hand. If we just check and Wit checks back, there are a lot of cards that can come on the turn that will weaken our holding, so that's bad. But we're not really so when we put money into the pot, we want to be accomplishing something. So we want to be either getting worse hands to call us, which is, you know, us making money, or we want to be getting better hands to fold. At a very high level, those are the two things that we want to be accomplishing with our bets. I don't believe that this is going to do either of these things. So if villain has a king, that's not necessarily true. If Wit has a hand like, you know, pocket 9s or pocket 10s or something like that, maybe he will. Or potentially a hand like ace 8 or something like that. Bearing in mind though that this guy did just rip it in with the 9-5 on 7-5 deuce or whatever it was, so maybe we don't even get those hands to fold. But we're not going to be getting worse hands to call realistically, or it's very unlikely that we are. So just always bear that in mind with what we are looking to accomplish with our bets. So we do go for the pot anyway. If either of these players puts more money in, we're kind of in a very annoying spot now where we don't really know what to do unless we improve. So given what we know about this guy, I don't like we're entering into the territory now where we're just investing a huge amount of our stack, and we hit about the gin river. So yeah, now we have a very easy jam, and I'd be very surprised to see a fold here. We got to go for it. I would assume that we have the best hand at this point. And okay, so Wit has the 8 jack. So this guy, he's here for a fun time. He's not going to be folding anything. we got a lot of more money in that we put a lot more money in there when we were behind than we did when we were ahead. So we need to bear that in mind as we're playing future hands. So we got very lucky there. We've got a lovely little double up now. We've got a decent stack to be working with. And Wit is going to be a bit on tilt now as well. Hopefully he rebuys, because this guy is definitely someone that we want to have around. He does €21 this time from the €20 originally. Nice. Hopefully that's not the last €21 he has in his account. But yeah, the pot sizing there on the flop and on the turn, as I said, it doesn't really accomplish too much, in the sense that he's going to have more better hands that are going to continue there than worse hands that are going to continue. If he's just stacking off there with the Jack 8, it's possible he can have like 7, 8 and stuff like that as well. But in general, when he keeps putting money in there, he's probably going to have us beat much more often than not. The 10-7 here, we just have a pretty easy fold on our hands. I saw it hovering over the calling button. Yeah, no, we should definitely just be folding this hand. So when we're starting out, we want to be, not when we're starting out. This is just basic strategy. Especially when you're starting out, you want to be making your post flop decisions as easy as possible. So how we do that? If we've got a relatively tight range pre-flop, so we're not going to put ourselves in a huge amount of tricky to navigate post-flop situations. And one of the, so we, again, 6-7, we should just be, this is another just straightforward fold. Now obviously from a reviewing the video point of view, it makes it very boring if we're just kind of doing folding, but it is what it is. And again, so if we are limping in, we have to call here. So we're getting a better price than we originally put in. So if we just go back here and just look at this, so we start off, we're putting 50 cent into a pot to win 75 cent. That's how it starts off. So before our 50 goes in here, so we're getting a little over, we're getting 6-4 on our money, right? As a limp. Now in this situation, limping is not desirable because people can raise and people can re-raise, and it puts us in very, very awkward spots where we do have to fold. But when we limp, this guy this is almost a min raise. Again, just for the record, I kind of advocate for a 2.5x raise size or a 3x raise size typically. When somebody else has limped in the pot already, we should be bringing that up again further. So if there's been a limper, we should be going to 3x, to 3.5x or to 4x. So this guy has only gone slightly over a min raise, and it's folded around to us. So we're now closing the action. And we only have to put in 64 to win 239. So if we just make this a bit easier and say it's 60 to win 240 for simplicity, we're getting about 4-1 on our money, a little less than 4-1. So we're actually getting a better price now than our original investment, and we're closing the action as well. And what I mean by closing the action is that when we click that call button, we're guaranteed to see a flop. When we do our original limp, where we're getting 6-4 on our money, then all sorts of things can happen where we just have to fold before we get to see that flop and realize any of our equity. So I'd be advocating just a straightforward fold pre-flop before investing anything. When we do limp and we face a raise of this size, though, we've got to see a flop. It's a mandatory spot. So let's keep going. Let's hopefully we make our big blind. We do. Nice. So King 3, not the prettiest of hands, but a hand that we will probably defend a decent chunk of the time versus a single raise. Versus this sizing, we should definitely be defending. So again, we're getting about 3-1 on our money. And we're closing the action. So that closing the action is always going to be a key point when we're looking at what kind of price that we're getting, because we know that that's our direct price that we're getting. There's nothing that can change with that, so we can't get re-raised and have to fold or anything like that. So we lead out here. I'm not a fan of this lead. So the reasons I'm not a fan, this guy has proven time, like in a couple of hands now, that he is here just for a fun time. He's not the kind of player to fold any sort of hand. So if he has any kind of pair, it's unlikely he's going to fold. Now, if we are going to lead, we have the king of diamonds, so we have we have 3 diamonds on board, which is kind of nice, but it's versus this kind of player, what we want to be doing is just playing a pretty value-orientated strategy. So we want to be betting when we have a decent hand and we can get paid, and we don't want to be trying to get into fold all that much when we don't have any sort of reasonable showdown value. So that would be what I would advise, how I would approach this kind of player, especially anyway. King 3 here, I don't mind either option. Limping in is fine, raising is fine. If he raises, he's gone pretty big here. I just go ahead and fold here. We elect the call. We check, which is pretty standard. We're just going to have to check fold on this board. I would expect him to bet this a pretty high percentage of the time. And if I were him, I'd be betting I'd be betting pretty small here, like €152. He's gone just under half pot. This half pot sizing accomplishes a lot. It just means that he can be betting all his ace X here as well as all of his bluffs as well, and we kind of just have to fold a massive portion of our range here. Like, this is a perfect example. And when we limp in and we limp call, we shouldn't have all that many good ace X or anything like that as well. So it's just a very good spot for him. Pocket eights here, I'd be calling in position, which is what we do. Nice. And looks like we're going to potentially go 4-way to this flop, which is absolutely a fine result with a hand like pocket eights. Let's hope that we see an 8 on the flop. We don't see an 8, but we don't see the worst of boards for us. Okay, so if sleeping dog bets here, I'm certainly not folding. We have a decision to make now. You're leaning towards the pot size bet. I think I like betting here, but again, I don't think we need to bet as big as pot. So if we go like 180 here, it accomplishes pretty much the exact same. So when we pot it, I don't think we're going to get value from worse hands. A 7 might call once, potentially. But this bet here, so I mentioned earlier on the two main things that we're looking to do when we are betting is either getting a better hand to fold or a worse hand to call. It's kind of hard for many worse hands to call here. Okay, and this call here is not something that I like. So we're putting ourselves in a situation where we've got second pair to the board. Bear in mind that there was three people to this flop, and this guy, we've potted it, and this guy is still raising. So the worst kind of hand I would expect this guy to show up with here is a very decent flush draw, which is going to have more often than not 2 overcards, at least 1 overcard to our pocket eights, as well as the diamond draw. And in a lot of instances, he'll have 2 overcards with the flush draw. That'd be the worst kind of hand I expect him to show up with, which is still doing quite well against us. He's also just going to have us drawing close to dead a lot here, where we just have to improve to an 8. So, and we're in a situation now where the pot is absolutely enormous, and we're clicking the call button, and it's just, I'd be very surprised if we're going to be ahead here. And the diamond is just meant that literally we're behind absolutely everything now. It's like basically impossible for villain to have a bluff here after he raised the flop, unless he was doing it with something like maybe 8-9, but we blocked that pretty heavily. Like 9-10 that he wanted to get really frisky with this. So our mistakes on this were potting the flop. I think as I said, I do like your bet, but I think we can go a lot smaller. When we get raised, it's just a straight up fold. We don't want to be continuing versus a check raise with second pair almost ever. And then when we call, like the turn is whatever, like he goes really small on the turn, so it puts us in an annoying spot. But the biggest mistakes were our pre-flop size and our calling of the raise. Queen 8 offsuit, just an easy fold. We don't want to be limping here. We want to just be folding this pre-flop. We have to fold to this size now. And we do not fold to this size. We go ahead and we call. So Queen 8 is a pretty trash hand all around. So I think in general, the biggest leaks that I'm seeing so far are for sure your opening ranges. So what kind of hands that we are playing. And that's something that you're going to need to get a complete lockdown on if you are going to continue playing, because with the way that we're playing our hands, especially if we're limping in these kind of weak holdings, we're just donating chips, and we're donating them very, very frequently and easily to our opponents. So would always be looking to, as I said, never open limp, and really adjust the kinds of hands that you are looking to play pre-flop. So like a lot of poker is just going to be a patience game. So, a lot of people kind of have this romantic image of poker as being, like it's whoever has the biggest balls to make these big bluffs and all this sort of thing. in reality, that's not really what it's about. It's about, especially starting out at the lower limits. Anyway, it's very much about playing solid ranges, playing better opening ranges than your opponents, and value betting your stronger holdings. Like in a nutshell, that's a big part of what playing fundamentally sound winning poker is. Like obviously there is an element of bluffing, but in general you're gonna wanting to be bluffing with hands that at least have some reasonable equity. So like things like flush draws, things like gut shots, open enders, those kinds of things. Ace nine definitely going to be bringing this in for a raise. Nice. To be hammering the points home again. We don't want to be min raising, but the fact that we are raising is what we want to see, so that's good. And we see a multi-way pot, so we go for the pot sizing again here. So yeah, I don't want to see a pot size here. I do like a bet. We can be going a lot cheaper though and accomplishing much the same. We can be going kind of a third pot, half pot. We'll still get hands that have reasonable equity against us to fold, and we will occasionally get value from worse hands when we choose the smaller sizing there as well. So ace five, again, much the same. Versus this limp, I'll be more than wow, he just limp folds. That's crazy. He shouldn't be limp folding there anything. If he's limping in the first time, he should be limping it. He should be calling your raise there all the time. So we should be going to 3x there in that instance, making a 150 instead of a euro. 5 deuce, very easy fold, of course. And I'm going to start fast forwarding through a little bit more. So I think in general, I think I've picked up on the main leaks that if I were talking directly to a student on a on a Skype call or anything like that, those would be the big things that I'd be looking to focus on. So there are some immediate wins that you can build into your game just by stopping to do this. So no open limping, just don't do it. As I said, there are some kind of instances where you might want to adopt that into your strategy, but those kind of instances are going to be a lot fewer and far between. You're going to be much better off just as a blanket rule always raising if you're going to play the hand. This is a prime example. So A, 7-10 offsuit is a trash hand, and B, you don't want to be open limping ever. Because if you think about it logically, when you raise, you've got two ways of winning the pot. So you can make the best hand post flop, or you can just get everyone to fold pre-flop. By limping, you don't have that ability to win pre-flop, which is bad because you're eliminating a very fundamental way of building your win rate. And also 10-7 is just a pretty trash hand, and it's hard to make that strong a hand post-flop. Obviously, there are some cases where you just flop the world and flop straights and all that sort of fun stuff, but they're going to be very, very few and far between. So, queen deuce suited. And sorry, I should caveat this, that when I say never open limp, the small blind versus the big blind is the one instance where I think open limping there is an argument for it. Okay, so let's just slow the video down. Again, I'm just going to be rehashing the same points here. Pot sizing here with second pair, we've seen you do that quite a lot. It doesn't accomplish what you want to accomplish. So if we are going to bet, which with this exact hand, I would say we shouldn't be betting. We should just be going into check mode because there's not that many bad cards for us that can roll off. If we've got the best hand here with our queen, which we will have a lot of the time for the record, the only real way this board gets worse for us is if a king comes off. So that's 4 cards in the deck that can make our hand kind of worse in relative to what's on the board. There's going to be a lot of instances where this just guy has, hands like, 9-10. And he's drawing pretty much dead. And when we bet here, he just always folds. If we check, we can occasionally get him to bluff, which is great. And we allow him the opportunity to catch up a little bit as well, where he's drawing two running cards. So in that instance, let's say he has a hand like 9-10 and a 9 rolls off on the turn. He now has a pair, and if we do bet small on the return, then he will probably have to call us. So we get a little bit of extra value there with no real risk in terms of cards that we're afraid of coming. So queen 7, yep, easy fold, nice. And we're going to be wrapping up part 1 pretty shortly, so I'm going to look to get to the halfway mark here of this video. We've been doing a little bit of pausing, a little bit of rewinding, so I'm going to look to fast forward for the last couple of minutes, and this first video is going to go slightly over the half-hour mark, but that's okay. As I said, the total we've got an hour of footage in total to review, and we'll do a little bit of a summary then at the end. So fortunately, we've had the biggest hand that we had was with the 8-9 versus Wit over here, which was a pretty dreamy hand for us to get the full double. We've whittled back down to around, I think we were in for 50 cent total. Okay, so ace jack, or sorry, 50 cent. We were in for 25 euro total. So versus this player, so this is a prime example here where we want to be raising and we want to be going a lot bigger here versus this guy. So this is the guy that we've identified as just being here purely for a fun time. He's not got much of a fold button, and ace jack is going to be doing quite well against a lot of his continuing range. So we want to be raising here. We want to be going to, at the bare minimum, 3 to 4 euro, and we could probably, like, after it goes raise and call, we can probably even be going to maybe up to, yeah, actually with our stack size, yeah, so somewhere in the region 350 4 euro is probably right. We go ahead and we pot here. This is whatever. Versus this player, again, because he doesn't really have that much of a fold button, he's going to be continuing with all of his pairs. We're in a very, very dicey situation now where we've established already that this guy does not want to fold to us. So we kind of have to shut down now and hope that we improve. So it looks like we're going to go ahead and jam here. Okay, we bet half pot. We have to call off now if this guy jams. Like we're paying 5 euro to win 35 euro for simplicity. We kind of have to click the call button. My days. Okay, apparently he's that sort of fun player where he doesn't need a pair to go along with his hand. Okay, so everything I just said apparently is entirely invalidated for getting value from worse hands there with the hand like ace jack, but this kind of player is not what you're going to encounter as the typical. So calling a pot with just ace high with no draw on that flop, and then just sticking the rest of it in when he picks up a gut shot on the turn. That's not the kind of fun player that you're going to encounter all that often. He's what we call a golden unicorn. We just love having him at the table. But I think in general there, we got quite lucky to be up against that specific hand. I think in general, we're going to be, when we continue betting, when we bet that flop that big and we bet the turn, much more often than not, we are going to be behind after our flop bet gets called, and certainly when we get jammed on the turn, it's nearly impossible for us to be ahead. So we'll take the double, but it's always very, very important in poker to remember not to be kind of results orientated. So if you make a play that's probably not going to be winning you money long term, even if it wins you money in that individual spot, it's important to remember that that's not something that you want to be doing every single time, because if it's not winning you money long term, even if it wins you money that one time, if you do that same thing 10, 15, 20, 30 times down the road, over time, that's going to start costing you a lot of money long term. So to sum up, we identified at the start of the video, if you're going to be playing a game, you should probably be learning to play 100 big blinds deep, just purely because that's going to be, I mean, to start out with, that's whatever. I think it's fine to buy in for 50 big blinds. But that should be your next steps, looking to get comfortable playing 100 big blind stack, because the vast majority of 6max games are going to be 100 big blinds deep. No, stop min raising. So if you're opening, maybe go to 2.5 or to 3x. So in a 50 cent game, you want to be going to 125 or 150 if you're the first person raising. If there's other limpers in, you can look to be going bigger and bigger and bigger again. And the same, if you're facing a raise, and you're re-raising, you want to be going bigger than just clicking it back and going for that min raise. You want to be sizing that up. Cut out your limping altogether, as we've discussed, so no open limping. And you really need to work on what hands that you want to play from different positions on the board. So that'd be probably the biggest leak that we've seen throughout this video, is just limping the kind of hands. Like I remember 10-7 offsuit was one of them. There was a lot of other instances throughout the video where we just kind of clicked the limp button. You want to be cutting that out completely. A, those are hands that you just don't want to play, and B, you don't want to be open limping them especially. So those would be the main kind of areas that we'd be looking to focus on. We're only halfway through this video, so I'm gonna cut this video here, and we're gonna have part 2 reviewing the second half, and we'll see if we can pick up on anything else. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll be back with part 2 very soon.